Hi guys, my name is Bríd, just as Sean said, a fellow Mayo person. I'm the conservation ranger for kind of around Tralee Bay, including Feenit, and bits of Castlemaine Harbour. So I work with William, that was on earlier on, Barry, Sam Bailey, they're all part of our team. Today I'm going to talk about the natterjack toad, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with, and if you're not, hopefully you will be by the end. Have any of you heard the natterjack in the past or recently? This is the time, yeah. So they have a very evocative, very kind of loud, very, I suppose sometimes even kind of unusual call. And in Ireland, they're the only toad. So that's what, if you hear it, that's the natterjack toad. So I'm just going to go through a bit about the work of National Parks and Wildlife Service, some of the partners that we work with, and then a bit about the communities as well. There's actually lots of work happening within the natterjack sphere, and it's such a restricted range. It's really only here in County Kerry, and even within County Kerry, it's only in a very small area. So we'll just see how we get on and see. So a little bit about the history of the natterjack. This is an image of the original range of them in Ireland. In 1836 was actually the first record of the natterjack, and that was in Callanafercy out in Castlemaine, which isn't too far away, and they're still there today. J.T. Mackay was a famous naturalist at the time, and he was down doing a flora survey and just came across them. And he always noted that they were close to the sea, which they still are today as well. And we'll tell you a bit about that in a few minutes. So after that then, a few more people started noticing them, making records of them. I'm sure they were there a long time before Mackay, but I suppose scientifically they were started to be noted more. So around the Evora Peninsula, Cahersiveen, and then over Caherdaniel, they were there naturally as well. But unusually enough, considering that there was a lot of naturalists around at the time, kind of looking around themselves, making notes and writing these all up in journals and whatnot, they still didn't discover officially that there was natterjacks near Castle Gregory, the Maharees Islands, until the 1960s. So between Fermoil, Castle Gregory, and a little bit past Castle Gregory as well, which I think is really unusual considering there would have been these scientists roaming the countryside at the time, and that this was the first kind of 1960s. Then in the 1990s, National Parks and Wildlife Service, or would have been called DUCAS back then, started to get more involved with them, and a reintroduction project happened over in Caherdaniel, where they still are today. And even this year, Caherdaniel was one of the first places that people heard the toads this year breeding. Then we also put some over to a dune site in Wexford, the Raven, if any of you know that one. It's over on the east coast. And they're still there as well today. So within historical times, there was a sea trade between Kerry and Iberia, which would be, was Portugal and kind of parts of Spain. So there's a theory that possibly they came in with sand ballast from ships, maybe into Dingle Bay, places like that. That's one of the theories. Another one, or kind of related, I suppose, is that they're a Lusitanian species. So we're very kind of unusual in that in Ireland we have some species we share with parts of Portugal and Spain as well, but not many other places then. And it's to do with the Ice Age. That why do we have these species, these kind of exotic species in Ireland when we were covered by ice for millions of years? So the natterjack toad is found from, I can show you the map in a minute, but it's kind of from Spain, Portugal, Spain, up to the Baltic. Also, genetic analysis showed that the natterjack is related to those in England, but only distantly related to those in Iberia. So in England as well would be considered the kind of the western part of the range, and they're also a protected species in England, and they would do a lot of the similar work that we're doing. So, are they true natives of Ireland? I think so. I think they were here a long time before 1836 as well. And perhaps they colonised the country naturally after the last glaciation, or there was land bridges and things like that. The natterjack is widely distributed, as I mentioned earlier. That's just a little picture of one. They're quite difficult to see in the wild unless you know where to look. So if you know a known breeding area, you may see them at this time of year coming out from their kind of like burrows and underneath stones and bits of kind of grass, tussocks of grass and things like that. But nice, pretty fella there. That's their range. They're in all around the world. That's where they are. And you can see the orange bits in the map are where they're kind of heavily present. So we're very much one of these range areas, and it's interesting for us to study that as well in relation to climate change going forward. Will they disappear? Will they expand? It's kind of interested to find out. So from the National Biodiversity Data Centre is just a little map of where they currently are in Ireland. And you can see kind of there the Maharees, Inch is a stronghold of them as well, and then around Castlemaine Harbour is another stronghold, and then a few little bits around the Iver, Caherdaniel, and on the right-hand side is the Raven. So nature reserve. That's a lovely nature reserve if anyone has ever head over that direction. They prefer coastal, marsh, heath, sand, dune habitats, but always where they have these temporary shallow pools. So they like pools that don't have too much vegetation in them, because once you start getting too much vegetation, you start getting more and more kind of insects and vertebrates, things like that. And they actually act as a predator in the pools. So they only come to the pools for breeding. The rest of the time, they're actually land-based, and they'll be up there in the grass, up on the hill, the side of the sand dune. They could be in the peatlands, in the bog, near around say like in Castlemaine Harbour, Loch O'Ganavan, Loch na Jarrag, if I can pronounce that right. They're very heathy areas. But again, it's that kind of wet land that just might not always be wet, just has these very temporal, ephemeral, they call them, ponds and pools, and shallow. They are nocturnal. They're active at night. And again, it's when predators are at their fewest, is usually at night when it's colder. So this time of year now, from middle of April, they'll actually, en masse, when the weather is at the right conditions, warm, kind of like not too wet, not too dry, and then whatever it is in them that triggers, they'll just leave their kind of their winter grounds, so to speak, and they'll come out to breed. If they don't get the weather, they sometimes won't even try breeding. During the day, they stay buried in sandy soils or under debris and stones. So, and you can actually, if you do see kind of a shallow pond and there's a bit of stone and you lifted it up, you'd probably be pretty guaranteed to see it. They're also one of the few amphibians that can tolerate this kind of brackish, freshwater, saltwater habitat. So that's just over there, Loch O'Ganavan area, I think. In Ireland, we only have 3 species of amphibian. So the common frog, the smooth newt, and then the natterjack toad. So on the left is the frog, and on the right is the smooth newt. So I'm not sure if anyone has come across them, but they're nice species to see as well in ponds and pools. But then the natterjack itself, we identify by the yellow line down its back. And then also they would have these things called parotoid glands here as well. And they actually secrete kind of a poison, which makes them very unpalatable to predators. But I think if we saw a toad in Ireland, I'm guarantee it will be the natterjack toad. If you find one somewhere else, it might be an invasive, an alien species, and I would contact your local ranger. Let's see. That's just another little picture there. I think you can see the glands there a bit better. So their life cycle, they leave their kind of, those kind of sheltered areas around mid-April if the weather is warm enough and there's been those April showers. Spawning occurs up until July, and then the number of breeding females varies greatly depending on the weather. So they have this thing called a boom and a bust life cycle. Some years, if the weather is right for them, they'll have a boom year. And if it's not great, which like maybe 2 years ago it wasn't, it just was very dry for some reason. This year is very wet, so a bust year there about 2 years ago. Uh, One of the ways we measure them, probably the main way that we can, count how many natterjack toads there are, is that each female lays one string of eggs. So they don't have like a clump of eggs like the frog does. They have these unusual strings, and one string of eggs per female per season. So we count the females basically. And I'll just see now if I have the strings. Sorry, now. Eggs usually hatch within 10 days from the strings, if they're conditioned, and they feed on algae and detritus. But I've even seen them eating other dead frog spawn and eggs and things like that. Metamorphosis occurs after 6 weeks. So this is a little toadlet, and he leaves the water and he'll climb up into the grass, try to find shelter, and then survival rates are very, very low. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes as well. You can see here the little toadlet and then the little tadpole as well. Thought I had the strings. I might have them in the next one now. So if you're in the Maharees or like around Lochgill or over in Castlemaine Harbour, Inch Beach in the dunes there, if you're walking around, right now you should be seeing lots of these strings, hopefully. So each string is one female. So you have to kind of try and count. And a few of us here today have been counting these in previous years and this year, and it's not an easy job. So here I would say that's one female, might be two, three. I mean, it's a bit subjective. So there you go. And then this is just a little bit, sorry about that. This is just one that's kind of got a little bit of stuff on it, but it's still viable. So hopefully that one was okay. Just a few images, because I think it's just nice to see them. They're such a visible species. We might think they are so rare, we'd never see them, but I'm sure you'll all have been an Inch maybe in the past few weeks or in the next few months. You'll all have been over in Maharees, and at night you'll definitely hear them around the Maharees. This is, so the tadpoles, they're still in the water. They literally, in other countries, will be in a pool, with a very small puddle on the ground. But here we kind of mainly have them on the sand dunes. And though the rainwater, it'll rain, nice for a week or two, the pool, and then it'll evaporate. And they love that heat that's within the pool then. This is when they are metamorphosed into toadlets, and they're starting to leave the water and get up into the sand. This is one of the ponds. That's a really good pond out in Maharees, actually. And you can drive by that now. And if you're there at about 9 o'clock at night, even during the day, you should hear them. So hopefully I have the video in a minute. That's just another pond in at the back there, Maharees. So this is a little video. It's going to be a bit loud, I hope. If any of you hear this, give me a call in strange places. I think that's it. So we're always looking for new areas as well. At the minute, we probably know most of the places they are, but there's still lots of places we suspect, or they would have been in the past, that we'd love to find out about. I suppose people often ask, well, why haven't they moved around? But it's a lot about their physiology as well. So, frogs hop, but our toad crawls, runs, and it doesn't travel very far from where it's born or where it lives, maybe a kilometre. So it's just not really set up for travelling long distances. So unless you translocate them, which we did in Derrynane, and they seem to be doing okay, over in the Raven. But is it worth us translocating them to other places? And possibly it is. It's one of the things that we look at in our studies of them. I was chatting to somebody earlier, and people remember not too long ago, 20, 30 years ago, they would have been you don't mind me saying it, one of the girls was telling me near Anna Graveyard. So that's right up into Tralee Town. But they're definitely not there now, I'm afraid. But if anyone heard them, you never know. So we would always be looking at the potential of, these kind of, maybe there's ones that are there that we don't know about. If they didn't notice them until the 1960s scientifically in the Maharees, then maybe we might get lucky. Just the National Parks and Wildlife Service do a lot of work then on the conservation of them, but we would also work with a lot of different groups and communities in that. So just the two main things that we do would be the monitoring. So we monitor all known natural or traditional breeding sites, and then we also monitor artificially created ponds, and then use that breeding activity to update our knowledge on their distribution, so where they are, their size, their population size, how they did that year, was it a boom or a bust year, habitat quality, which can change all the time, and is probably one of the factors that we're not hearing them in Anna anymore, threats and pressures. So new threats, new pressures come along as well all the time. Then the collaboration side of things is toad spawn, is some examples. Toad spawn has been transferred to Fota Wildlife Park. So usually in most years, if we think there's some populations or some little sets of them that are in ponds that are a bit fragile or maybe susceptible to drying out or something like that, we'll actually take the frog spawn and we'll actually bring it down to Fota Wildlife Park, and they rear them up until they're kind of toadlets, and then they'll come back to us before the end of the summer and released back onto their site. We also do it with Dingle aquariums, so the Inch Beach, Castlemaine side of things, they go to the Dingle Aquarium. And I mean, the main reason we do this is that there's actually usually a 90% death rate, mortality rate for natterjack frog spawn and tadpoles and things like that. So, but they can actually have, so it goes from 90% mortality to like less than 25% mortality when they go to the specialist aquariums. These are some of the other stuff that we do. We do a pond creation scheme, which is a really interesting and real busy part of the work of MPWS. We do the population augmentation program is the one with Fota Wildlife and the Dingle Aquarium. And then awareness and education really is, I probably should have called that community work as well. So just up at the top is some of the staff from Fota Wildlife Park and our minister, Malcolm Noonan. And a lot of these photos came from Fota, came from Dingle Aquarium, came from MPWS ourselves, and also our community, especially the Maharees Conservation Community or Conservation Group. This up here is a recent workshop we had for some farm advisors. I'll tell you about that in a minute. And then these are just some of the community that are releasing the toadlets from Fota back into the wild. So as I mentioned earlier, the monitoring, we do that in kind of cycles, but we're looking every year. As a ranger, I'm looking every year, but we do these programs every kind of few years. We have to report back on the quality, or I suppose the status of the natterjack toad to the European Union. It's called an Annex 4 species, which is very important. We're looking at the population size, the trends, what's the habitat like, things like that, and an assessment of the pond creation scheme. And then we go on and we make like recommendations from that. Is there areas that should be prioritised? So at the minute, I mean, there's a group looking at around Tullaree and Castle Gregory, places like that, where they actually are still heard and people still see them in their back gardens. And I've had people telling me they come into their house, and apparently it was quite normal that they used to come into people's houses back in the day. We look at the reports on threats and pressures facing the natterjack. So sometimes it could be like, we'd like in these ponds to have like low grass around them, so you probably need a lot of like grazing. But sometimes you can have too much, not grazing, but too much poaching by the cattle, making marks in the ground, things like that. So sometimes we might have to work with farmers and just say, do you mind putting a little fence around something, or can we move the cattle somewhere else? There's a new contract just awarded to Queen's University Belfast, and they have a team of people, including a PhD student, for the next this year, 2025 and 2026, and they're going to do most of that work for us. They're basically around the known traditional breeding sites. MTU students as well are going to help them with the field work, because it's a huge undertaking. On the Maharees alone, there's like over 20 known ponds that they regularly look at. But then there's over 100 ponds that are in farm plans with an MPWS, things like that. So a lot of work, and you have to go and survey each pond basically every 10 days through the breeding period. So it's a lot of driving around. The pond creation scheme is a great scheme that's been going for a good while. So because it is our rarest amphibian and it's red listed as endangered, we have to protect it. So prior to the pond creation scheme, which primarily involves farmers, there was only 12 sites in County Kerry that were regular, I suppose, natterjack breeding spots. But now that's up to we've built over 100 ponds, and some farmers have 2, some 3, 4 ponds on their land. There was a payment for that scheme, and it was dependent on compliance with a number of like habitat measures, like I mentioned, grazing around the pond so that the little toadlets can climb out of the water easily up into the more sheltered areas. Then it became a results-based scheme, which means that we have to see success, or we have to see what's going wrong if it's not working. And now we've been brought in together with Acres, which is this new agri-environment scheme that people probably have heard of. So this is just one from last week that there was a training on for Acres advisors. And Kerry West Cork Acres and Photo Wildlife Park actually brought back some and released them into some of those farmers' ponds. So some of you today might be actually in Acres or Acres CP plans and things like that. The population augmentation program then. So, our mortality rate's as low as 25%, which is amazing, actually. They have so many predators. Everything eats them. Insects eat them. Birds eat them. Cows drink them by accident. We can walk on them. There's pollution. The pond could dry out. Everything is against them. So they really do. When we have a pond in a traditional area that looks like it's going to go really quickly, some of the ponds might only last days. The natterjack will rush in there to breed. And then unfortunately, if that dried up, we've lost all of those natterjacks, which could be, could be 20, 30 females breeding. And so what we do is we rush in, we're always keeping an eye on the ponds, or the local community will tell us, and we pick them up, scoop them up, and bring them actually to Cork, physically bring them to Cork. Photo to date has actually released over 9,000 toadlets. So I'm not sure what 25% of 9,000 is, but it's better than 90% death that would have happened otherwise. Dingle Ocean World have been really good as well, and they actually partner with Natterjack Whiskey, and so they do the program for that side of things. They're released back into the area that they were rescued in. And then as part of the farm plan scheme, 1,600 toadlets were released last year back around Castle Gregory, kind of Fermoyle area, into ponds which had been specially created by local farmers. So this is just some of the people involved in Dingle. That's some of the rangers there, Sean and Ger, Marie and Scott. And this is when we were releasing them back. Marie was the head aquarist there in Dingle, and she had raised them from the spawn, the eggs, up to these little toadlets. And then Scott was with Natterjack Whiskey, who sponsored it. So they were trying to give us free whiskey that day, but we declined. I think Marie took one, I'm not sure. So then also FOTA have been really good. John is who I'd work with a lot there, and he is involved in this kind of setup. Marie would have the same. You've got like lights for heating to stimulate day and night time, things like that. That's just our minister. And they came back down. And this is over in the Maharees with some of the commonage people releasing back into the wild. So it's a very, very precise thing to do. Too much oxygen can kill them. Too little oxygen can kill them. Too much heat can kill them. Too little heat can kill them, etc., etc. They've everything going against them. So that's kind of a bit of a wrap up of it. I think I might go back and just, if you don't mind, play the video of the call again, because it's such a nice call, and I'd love you, if you are out, to be able to hear it. Is that okay with the guys there for a second? Oh, sorry, I've gone too far, have I? 1 second. There we go. Are you okay if I play it one more time? Thanks. Thank you for that. And and if you do hear any, you can give me a call or an email. So thanks.
Now, we'll have a few questions, Bríd, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Stay here.
Somebody mentioned actually that Duke's golf course.
They have good population down there as well, actually. So if you're in that area,
Yep. For anybody who's golfing in Duke's,
careful Lochaganavan is down there as well, actually. Lochaganavan is down there. Naganavan, am I pronouncing it right? I'm Mayo. Sorry.
Well, you're asking the right one.
Yeah, there's plenty down there as well in very peaty, boggy water. So if you're driving by there, keep an ear out.
God, you're making me homesick talking about peaty, boggy places.
Yeah. No toads, though.
Have we any questions? We have a question right down here at the back. See, this is great for the old Fitbit.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was excellent. I was just wondering, what is the difference between the sound of the natterjack toad and a common frog? Because at home we have a lot of frogs, and they also make quite, especially at the breeding time, they make.
Yeah, I suppose it's the way they do it as well, I think. I think the common frog kind of comes out of the side more, so you'd have a different pitch and things like that. Well, I wouldn't know the technicalities of it now, but it also would be at a very different time of year. So the common frog probably is a bit earlier. You're talking maybe February, March, and then the toad would definitely be April onwards, mid-April even. Some years it could even be later. Very unusual for it to be earlier, though. So it's just the weather, yeah.
There we go.
I was just wondering, what could we do to help the toad?
Yeah, it's a kind of a tough one because they don't travel very far of their own accord. But what we are doing, and what a lot of the farmers actually, and if you even had if you lived in an area that they were in the past, or you near an area where they are now, we really ask people, maybe you could create a bit of a pond. The only thing is, the pond that's good for the natterjack toad is usually not a good pond for wildlife. So it's a bit of you might like to do a pond in your garden, and you think, oh great, I'll put a pond in, and then you've got loads of dragonflies and damselflies and beetles coming into your pond, but actually the natterjack is going to avoid it. So I probably recommend, if you live in an area where they used to be, sometimes you can do a scrape on the ground and put a bit of water might go into it. You never know. But at the minute, it really is if you're in an area where the natterjack is. But long term, we may think about putting them in other areas where they used to be. What do you think yourself? Would you have any ideas from that? If you don't mind me asking.
Yeah, I think it would be a good idea just to like make a little area in the corner of your garden or something because water could build up in the corner of the garden.
Definitely, I think, yeah. And it's no harm, just a little corner. And sometimes, like a proper wildlife pond can be a lot of work. But if you just have a bit of land at the back, why not? And also, birds might like it, or other wildlife might like it. Thanks.
Hi, thanks for that. It was great. I'm just wondering, I met one down in Daniel. I had a face-to-face.
Oh.
And it was actually up more in mountainous areas. I was wondering, is that unusual?
Yeah. I mean, how far up the mountain was it there, I wonder? Up the side of the
It
hill?
was about maybe 300 metres. Like, it was quite
Okay.
high.
Yeah, I mean, they can travel about a kilometre, so they run, they don't hop, so possibly they're trying to expand their range there. Was there a bit of water around the area,
It
or?
was quite wet, it was
Oh,
quite,
yeah.
it was quite marshy.
Okay, that's actually good information. I might ask you where that was,
Yeah, it was
because
down- I'll find out exactly the place.
Yeah,
I was kind of wandering.
no. Yeah, they can be in it. Usually, you wouldn't find them up the side of
I
hills
actually
or
have a
mountains.
photo. I took a
but
photo.
Oh,
I was so
brilliant.
close, and I thought he's going to be gone now, but
Yeah.
he stayed. I have a photo.
They typically stay close to the coast, so I'd like to know about that. Thank you. Yeah,
Okay, maybe Sally, and you might,
Yeah,
you might have a
definitely,
chat
yeah,
with Bríd
yeah.
afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's why
Okay.
it's so important to get records of them, because I think they're definitely out there. It's just nobody's listening for them, probably, and it's such a short space of time that you'd actually be able to hear them or see them. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. That was great. I was just wondering, do they compete with frogs for habitat?
Sorry?
Let's say where you'd have frogs living already, but is there competition?
No, not really. No,
Yeah.
because they really first of all, they lay their eggs at a different time, so the frog is a little bit ahead of them, but also the natterjack really likes that like hot water, kind of shallow, and so you'd find them in your gardens and things like that. So not particularly in the sand dunes. It's a bit more. It's not as suitable for frogs, although you get them there. And they also tolerate that kind of salt water, fresh water a bit better than normal frogs. So I don't think there's competition really now, unless the frog starts eating them. But yeah, so
Hi.
Yeah.
Just wondering, what's their lifespan?
they can be like up to 5-6 years of length. Yeah, so even longer actually. When they lay their eggs, it takes them about 6 weeks to get to toddle it, and then off they go for a few years and kind of hide away, and then they'll really only come out when it's that perfect breeding conditions, but they're there the whole time. Like in Castle Gregory in the golf club, they're there the whole time, and people have funny sightings of them at certain times of the year as well. Yeah, so
So down here, Bríd.
Just wondering, what's the best time of the evening or night or month to go to hear them? And are they aware of you as you approach? Do you have to be very, very quiet? Or what?
a bit of both actually. It's funny, sometimes they say like nighttime is the best, so dusk and getting darker especially. And now from the middle of April until the end of May, I would recommend probably just driving around the Maharees, driving down the road like where kind of from Castlemaine down to Inch, walking through Inch maybe. Best not to shine a light on them, try not to get too close to them, but the best thing about them is that they're so loud, so you can hear them during the day. One male you'll hear him, you'll know he's there, and then they do congregate at night, and that's when it gets really loud. But any day that I would go out to these areas, I'd hear one during the day, but I recommend night and just driving. Like, I don't know about if Sean knows, up in Belmullet we have the corncrake as well, and it's a very rare and kind of has a very small range in Ireland. But if you just drive around the Mullet Peninsula at night, you can hear the corncrake. Well, if you drive around the Maharees at night, you'll hear the natterjack toad, just slowly. Yeah.
What is their natural predators, and are we doing anything to protect them in the environments that they are thriving in?
Yeah, they have so many predators. I suppose the natural predators are the things like the insects eat the tadpoles, the eggs, because when they're adults, they're not very tasty. They're like people try to eat them, or not people, sorry. Although I don't know now, but animals would try and eat them. So birds would try and eat them, gulls, crows, herons. Foxes might try and eat them as well, but they'll usually spit them out when they're at adult stage. When they're at the young juvenile stage, like eggs and toadlets, they just kind of eat them, they don't have too much of a bad taste. They're the natural predators. So like, especially insects, like diving beetles, when they're young, when juvenile diving beetles are ferocious. So they will eat everything in their path, and dragonfly larvae will eat everything in their path. So that's why you don't want a very wildlife friendly pond. But from the environmental side of things, I mean, the weather, climate change, farming practices, drainage of land, things like that. So working with the farmers around Castlemaine Harbour in particular, they're doing a lot really by actually trying to set up a network of ponds in that area that they can go from one area to another by doing grazing around the edges and whatnot. So it's actually, I think there's a lot of work been done to try and help them, but I don't think we can really predict what's going to happen with climate change. Might be good for them, bad for them. I think in Ireland we're supposed to be getting a lot wetter in the future as well. So if we don't have those ponds that are going to dry up, it's not going to maybe trigger the natterjack, and maybe the wildlife will end up going into those more permanent ponds, the larvae and all that kind of thing. Yeah.
I was just wondering, how big would the average natterjack toad be?
Yeah, that's a good question. About that size, about kind of the size of between that and that. They don't get too big. And I mean, the main thing is as well, like they have kind of short legs, so they only really run around the place. So they won't be hopping around. So if you see something crawling, that would be the natterjack. They look quite different, and that yellow stripe as well. They can be, because they take a few years to grow to adult size. So what do you think about that size, I'd say? Might get a bigger one, but yeah, that's the roughly. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have a couple of questions coming up. There's one here, and I've one there.
Hi, Bríd.
Hiya.
He sounds quite funny, I think. He sounds kind of precious and demanding. He won't go in if it's too hot or too cold or has
She
to be
won't as
She
well.
won't as well.
Yeah.
But does it affect them in any way negatively when you take them out, and put them back in?
Well, we only do it when there's a threat of drying up. So we don't want to be doing it. We only do it when we can see the pond, and you can go to a pond one day and there's lots of water in it, like say out an inch. There could be lots of pond, a little pool, and you go back 2 days later and you can just see the water it's nearly gone. So yeah, and that's the time then we say, okay, we better go and take some. And it's a bit of an emergency then when we do that. We could do it 3 times, 4 times in a season. The team that are out there now, so I would have done it in the past. Now there's a new team, the Queens and MTU team. They're going to be doing the whole circuit every 10 days. So they're going to be at ponds, very regularly. And once they see a pond drying up, they're going to ring and say, we got to get John from FOTA. And so it is a bit of a last minute thing, and we really only do it because we know 100% is going to die if we don't do it. Yeah.
Yeah, just as I'm making my way down here to the questioner, you notice this code up here. If you scan that, it's €1, which is contribution towards the running costs of the festival. Apparently, there's been 299 donations, John tells me, and whoever is the 300th donor, John is going to sponsor a banana. €1 for a banana he bought in Garvey's for 40 cents.
Thanks for an excellent presentation. Now, my question is slightly different from the natterjack. In North Kerry, in the bogs, at one time, the common frog was very, very numerous. But now, you hardly see the common frog in our bogs in North Kerry. from an environmental point of view and factors, it's still a bog. There's no farming in the vicinity of these bogs, and it's still ponds there. But it is a fact that we have noticed in the bogs,
Yeah.
the common frog.
I've noticed that myself as well, actually. Maybe not in North Kerry, but in other places. And frogs and amphibians are very much a barometer of what's going on in the environment. So, you know, we do have to pay attention when we're noticing differences. I mean, they could be more subject to things like, I mean, forestry in an area, runoff. Possibly they're also prone to a lot of like diseases. Now, we might not see the diseases again certain times a year. Maybe there's predators. There is frog surveys have been done in the past, and I know there's people interested in frogs at the minute, but it's kind of it's happening all around the world, is that we're seeing changes in, I suppose, the range of different amphibians and their habits and even their habitats as well. So I'm not really sure, to be honest. But again, the natterjack is so sensitive. All amphibians are so sensitive to changes in temperature, oxygen, you know, lots of things. So I'd have to, sorry now I can't answer it, but I agree with you, and it's a very kind of, you know, the canary in the mine kind of thing as well, unfortunately, I think, yeah.
Okay,
All right.
Bríd.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Okay,
Have a nice
that was amazing.